Founded in 1965 at the pinnacle of rock and pop music, Pink Floyd brought us some of the most incredible progressive rock and psychedelic hits of the 60s and 70s, including Wish You Were Here, Another Brick in the Wall, Comfortably Numb, Money, and Time. They are best known for their instrumental experimentation, lavish concerts, and thoughtful lyrics, a combination which led them to become one of the most beloved and successful bands in history. Following in the footsteps of fellow English bands, Pink Floyd would come to inspire a generation of musicians and change the musical landscape forever. Throughout their tumultuous career, they truly established themselves as an iconic group that was undefeatable in terms of conceptual albums and philosophical lyrics. Today, we are bringing you 10 interesting facts that you might not know about the hypnotizing Pink Floyd. Let's do this. Syd Barrett, who co-founded Pink Floyd in 1965, was kicked out in 1968 while the band was on the way to a performance. His use of psychedelic drugs, which was originally a source of both lyrical and instrumental inspiration, led to a decline in his mental health. Barrett suffered from depression, hallucinations, and mood swings, which made it difficult for him to be truly present during performances, as well as work with his bandmates. When Barrett was ousted from the band, he started a solo career and released 2 albums that lasted a few years. Finally, in 1972, he completely retired from the music industry and lived in complete privacy. Nick Mason, the band's drummer, weighed in on the matter in a radio interview. He says, "I think the jury's still out, in a way, in terms of what really happened to Syd. And I think it's something that'll never really be answered, because there are really 2 schools of thought. One was that it was overdosing on acid, which certainly is quite likely, but it could also be to do with the fact that he didn't want to be a rock god. He actually wanted to go back and be a painter, and I think we now feel what he probably, well, we certainly weren't helpful, because we assumed that would mean he was mad. I think in hindsight, one can look at it and go, actually, maybe that was the way he would have wanted it or want to go." Their album, The Dark Side of the Moon, was once the world's highest-selling album of all time. It is now down to 4th, but it is said that 1 in every 12 people owns the album. The album focuses on the mental health issues of previous band member Syd Barrett and the band's hectic lifestyle as a rock group. David Gilmour, Pink Floyd's guitarist and vocalist, said the following about the album's success. "And this was clear and concise. The cover was also right. I think it's become like a benevolent noose hanging behind us. Throughout our entire career, people have said we would never top the Dark Side record and tour. The Dark Side of the Moon was also selected for preservation in the United States National Recording Registry by the Library of Congress for being deemed culturally, historically, and aesthetically significant, a true honor and demonstration of the album's impact." Another Dark Side of the Moon interesting fact, the album is said to sync up perfectly with the film The Wizard of Oz. This rumor began circulating in 1994 and even has 2 names, often called Dark Side of the Rainbow or Dark Side of Oz. This has led many to believe that Pink Floyd did this intentionally, and many people have watched the film while listening to the album to prove so. Some outstanding coincidences and synchronicities people have noticed while playing the film and the album simultaneously is Dorothy starting to jog at the lyric, "No one told you when to run," during the song Time, and Dorothy balancing on a tightrope during the lyric, "Balance on the biggest wave," in the song Breathe. However, Nick Mason and David Gilmour have both said that The Dark Side of the Moon was never intended to match up with The Wizard of Oz. Audio engineer Alan Parsons said the film was never mentioned during the album's recording session. However, fans continue to speculate. Rumors similar to this one seem to be quite popular with Pink Floyd. The cover of the band's album, Animals, their 10th studio album released in 1977, is iconic for its reference to a famous book. The cover features the Battersea Power Station and in the distance a floating pig. This is a nod at George Orwell's Animal Farm, a book whose concept also inspired the album lyrically. Animals' lyrics describe different classes in society as types of animals. They are the predators predatory dogs, the ruthless pigs, and the mindless and unquestioning herd of sheep. While the novel is based on Stalinism, The Animals is Pink Floyd's critique of late capitalism. Roger Waters, the band's vocalist and lyricist, said the following about the song Sheep on the album. There are too many of us in the world, and we treat each other badly. We get obsessed with things, and there aren't enough of the things, products, to go around. If we're persuaded it's important to have them, that we're nothing without them, and there aren't enough of them to go around, the people without them are going to get angry. Content and discontent follow very closely the rise and fall on the graph of world recession and expansion. Pink Floyd reinvented the live music experience. Their concerts were almost always multimedia events, including film, in addition to their musical performances. Their visuals were so magnificent that they often outweighed the performers themselves. They used special effects, light shows, and props to enhance the audience's viewing experience. At the time, this was new and exciting, as Pink Floyd was one of the first bands to incorporate such grand spectacles. One example of such an extraordinarily over-the-top special effect was used in 1973 when they were on tour to promote The Dark Side of the Moon. The band had a large-scale model plane fly over the audience and crash onto the stage with a huge explosion. And for their 1977 tour of Animals, they had a giant pig floating over the audience. In addition to a nuclear family, a refrigerator filled with snakes, a Cadillac, and a television, all symbols meant to critique capitalism. Pink Floyd performed the world's first surround sound concert. They did so on May 12, 1967 at London's Queen Elizabeth Hall, changing how we would listen to live music forever. The concert debuted the band's custom-made quadraphonic sound system called the Azimuth Co-Coordinator, a huge technological advancement in the music industry. On the band's first test run, sound engineer Bernard Spate hooked up an additional set of speakers to the usual stereo pair and put them in the back of the recording room, ultimately creating a surround sound effect. They would then recreate such a system at Pink Floyd's live concert. Nick Mason explains how the system worked when it was placed on Richard Wright's, the band's keyboardist's, piano, saying, "If the joystick was upright, the sound was centered, but moving it diagonally would dispatch the sound to the speaker in the equivalent corner of the hall. Rick could send his keyboard sound swirling around the auditorium or making footsteps supplied from a Revox tape recorder apparently march across from one side to the other." While the band members of Pink Floyd often contributed to albums beyond their original roles, instruments, and talents, drummer Nick Mason had only ever sung one line in Pink Floyd's history. On the song One of These Days, Mason sings the line, "One of these days, I'm gonna cut you into little pieces." Mason does, however, sing lead vocals on two unreleased tracks called Scream Thy Last Scream, written by Syd Barrett, and the Merry Xmas song, and in live performances of the song Sheep. Mason would perform the spoken section. However, unlike the rest of the band, he truly never takes lead vocals or even background vocals. Instead, Mason was highly valued for his drumming style. But, funny enough, he doesn't recall putting in much time in his talents in the beginning of his career. Mason says, "From 65 to the beginning of 67, we were a really amateur band. It's funny because if I could add up the hours of actual drum playing I did between birth and 1966, it'd be, 100, 160 hours. I didn't practice. I didn't study. I just had a drum kit and played with my friends for fun. A year later, I'd probably put in 700 hours." Pink Floyd and the Beatles recorded albums next to each other. You know I like this. 1967, Pink Floyd began recording their first album called The Piper at the Gates of Dawn at Abbey Road Studios in Studio 3. Meanwhile, the Beatles were well into recording sessions of their most influential album, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, in Studio 2. The bands even shared the same EMI sound engineer, Norman Smith, for these albums. However, the band didn't interact much with an exception of Pink Floyd being invited to watch the Beatles record Lovely Rita in March 1967. Roger Waters recalls a brief encounter with one of the Beatles, saying, "I only met John Lennon once, to my huge regret, and that was in the control room at number 2. He was a bit acerbic, he was quite snotty, so was I. Still, it's pretty unbelievable that two of music's greatest bands were recording such important work right next to each other." In 1972, Pink Floyd recorded a live concert in the amphitheater at Pompeii with no audience. The idea was given to them by film director Adrian Mabin, who proposed making an anti-concert film in response to the features Monterey Pop and Gimme Shelter. Mabin explains his idea saying, "I felt at the time that we'd had enough of concert films, so the main idea of the film was to do a sort of anti-Woodstock film, where there would be nobody present and the music and silence and empty amphitheater would mean as much, if not more, than a million crowd." When the band arrived in Pompeii, Mabin addressed them with a serious issue. There was no electricity at the site. He had to run an extension cable from the amphitheater all the way to the church in the city center, a feat that took a whole 3 days to fix. However, once all obstacles were tackled, the film was recorded smoothly, and the amphitheater's design provided amazing acoustics for the film. Pink Floyd was sued by a group of people who were once featured on one of their songs. In one of their most famous songs, Another Brick in the Wall Part 2, there is a choir of children that sing the verse and choruses with the band. These children were never paid for their part in the song. Therefore, in 2004, the now adults filed a lawsuit against Pink Floyd for overdue royalties. Their lawyer asked for £6,000 for the 23 students of Islington Green School who contributed to the song. While they lost the lawsuit, the school was paid £1,000 and given a platinum record. What's interesting is that the song was recorded without the permission of the school's headmistress. However, after being approached by Pink Floyd's management, music teacher Alan Renshaw took his students to Britannia Row, a recording studio where the band was recording the song for their album, The Wall, and went ahead with it anyways. Well, that's all for today, everyone. I hope you enjoy the video, and we'll see you next time.